Welcome to the Continuum, a podcast from the New York City Mayor's Office of Community Mental Health. The Mayor's Office of Community Mental Health, or OCMH, is a unique office where we are proud to work across city agencies and multiple sectors to promote mental health. And I love saying that we activate all parts of government to really care for New Yorkers' mental health. And here we believe that mental health is health, and this administration believes that, Mayor believes that, and it is essential for every single New Yorker, whether we are healthy and thriving, coping, or really kind of just struggling and maybe surviving, right? Sometimes that's how we feel like, and or we're dealing with a mental crisis. Our office coordinates citywide policies and strategies to fill critical gaps in mental health care, ensuring that every New Yorker has access to the support that they need and quality support. And in this podcast, what we do is we delve into the multifaceted world of mental well-being, exploring the innovative strategies and dedicated efforts that are shaping a healthier New York City with leading experts, community leaders, advocates, and individuals with lived experience, all working to ensure that every New Yorker has the support they need to lead healthy and fulfilling lives. And I am Eva Wong, Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of Community Mental Health, and I'm your host today as we navigate the diverse landscape of mental health, from prevention and early intervention to treatment and recovery. In this episode, we're very excited to welcome Barry Cooper, known to many affectionately as Coach Coop. And Barry is the founder and executive director of the B.R.O Experience Foundation. And B.R.O Experience, B.R.O, stands for Brothers Redefining Opportunity. And I love that name. With over a decade of experience as an educator supporting young men of color, Coach founded the organization in 2020 to expand his vital work in closing the Black male mental health gap. And please read his bio, notes is included. And I'm just so excited. Thank you, Coach, for joining me today.
No problem, Eva. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to dive into this conversation, and thank you for you and your team for even exploring these type of conversations for community members to listen to. So let's do it.
Yes, let's get started on really talking about how things started, right? You dedicated over a decade to youth development. And what was that pivotal moment or core insight where kind of that light bulb where that led you to found the B.R.O Experience in 2020? I'd love to hear that Genesis story.
Yeah, I was the dean and director of culture for Eagle Academy, the all boys school that's within the tri-state, for a number of years. And also while doing that, I was doing work with the Department of Probation under the Center of New Leadership, where we were doing policies around broken window policies, like small crimes and petty arrest and things like that. And throughout that work. Working with young men and creating spaces for them inside of these institutions, what I realized is that, you know, a lot of times I would do this amazing work and it would be a situation where I had the privilege of leaving and they still had to navigate life on their own. So that just always been something that was like burning in the back of my mind. Like, what if young men had a space outside of the traditional education system, or that wasn't necessarily created for them post incarceration or
Mm,
crisis? What if we created a space where they can just heal, be, and it was for them, driven by them, everything that was created in the midst of the pandemic, when we all had a chance to kind of like sit down, I started to question like, what are you going to do next? What is your legacy going to be? And that thought of creating that space authentically that will create brave voices that can
mm,
be full of connection is where I kind of like landed, and that it was the birth of the bro experience, or the bro space, was just this need to give young men a space outside of their homes, outside of institutions like education, out of the Department of Probation, or even hospitals, that was rooted in the cultivation and the development of young men. And I started doing the writing and just kind of like seeing, the outcomes of like what would a space like that provide. And after that, it was just on. I just made it happen.
Yeah, you had the vision and the timing was right, it seems like, right? Because people were
Yeah.
just coming out of lockdown and really craving that connection and in-person connection, even though ironic, we're meeting online today. Just, Coach and I have our in-person kind of hangout before. So that's why I knew that it would be a perfect, guest for our podcast. But it seemed like the timing was right and really the community needed it. That's why things just kind of flowed, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's so important that you said that. It was very, very loud because when you think about at the time that I even thought that or manifested the idea of creating the nonprofit, we were battling the epidemic and the pandemic of COVID, and we were living in a world where anyone that was over 35 at the time, we were in the house trying to keep ourselves alive because of the messaging or just hearing about people losing their lives due to COVID
Mm,
because we were older in age. And then we had this tale of a New York City where young people weren't as affected or impacted and they were outside. So like they were navigating the world for 2.5 years, um, where there weren't many adults out or young people were actually losing their parents. So the 8-1 precinct commanding officer and Inspector Glenn at the time was having a lot of issues in the corridor of Bedford Stuyvesant and Malcolm X in Bed-Stuy, and he reached out to me. I was like, "Cool, I need you to come here." And I'm like, "It's COVID. What are you talking about?" And he was just like, we're having like a lot of issues with negative and gang activity. These young men need something. Will you please just kind of like jump on a Zoom to meet the community and see what happens? And I did that, and he instantly thrusted me into this work, and it accelerated the process. To be honest with you, so I was like, well, when I got on the call with all of these people, I was like, I'm the founder of the Bro Experience Foundation. We're a new
yeah.
nonprofit. My work expands so many decades. And I went into Jackie Robinson houses and started doing the work. And we've never looked back since. We started with 12 participants, and now we're servicing over like 250, 300 a year, which is just super exciting. So it was that pivotal moment, that time where people were really crying out for something different for our young men. And I was able to lay out the framework for the organization.
And I've been to your space, and it's lovely. I love the
Yeah.
colors. I love that you can feel young people. It's a place for young people. So, and I like to say that as a former young person, right? Like we kind of feel like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like I kind of know still what it's like to have a place that's called your own, right? We're not just
a
hanging on
hundred
the
percent.
street. Definitely don't want to be doing that in the heat wave that we just had last week.
A
So,
hundred percent. 100%.
at the Mayor's Office of Community Mental Health, we believe that every New Yorker really deserve right access to quality mental health support, and it needs to be responsive to their identity and understand a unique lived experience. And so, Coach, how does the Borough experience specifically redefine opportunity to address the unique mental well-being needs and challenges faced by young Black men today? I know you've written about it. I know that our listener would love to hear you speak about it. I'm going to put a second part and repeat it later. So how do you define it, address it, and what specific strategies has the Bro experience found most effective in breaking down those traditional barriers, right? And you speak eloquently about that. You've written about it, and love to hear
Yeah.
your perspective.
Yeah. The first part is let's handle the definition of it, because I think
Mm,
that what we try to do our best as an organization and then with our participants, but then also with the world, is that oftentimes what we don't realize is that when we are speaking about mental health, we often revert to the stigmas. And we don't really, as far as the language goes, we don't really clarify that, a mental illness is a mental illness. Mental health is actually someone operating, or that is the way that we should operate going
mm,
forward. So we oftentimes make a distinction in between the two, so that way young men and men can decrease their level of anxiety, because when they hear mental health, they only think about their problem,
illness, right?
right?
Yeah.
They only think about the, and I'm like, nah, when we think of mental health, we actually thinking about like, what does it feel like to feel good and be
Mm,
tapped into it? What does it feel like when you know that you are actually aware of your anger or your sadness or your frustration? And then we also speak to them about, all right, well, this is what an illness or a disorder looks like. So we give them the language. We allow them to, and we have them understand the difference between what the two are saying. Now, there is mental illness, mental disorders, and mental struggles. There are emotional struggles, but when you are operating from an emotionally healthy place or a mental healthy place, that's also terminology as well. So that's the first thing I think we do that I'm really, really proud of, is that we make that fine distinction for the people that we're in front of. The other thing is that, doing this work and kind of like dabbling into a lot of different um, modalities of transformational education, just understanding like deeper psychosocial therapy. What I realized is back in maybe right before the pandemic, I kind of had the privilege of being trained in cognitive behavior therapy. And
Mhm.
when I realized how practical it was, I just went headfirst into the whole concept of it.
Mhm.
And practicing it, not or rolling it out with young men, what I found it was very practical.
Mm.
They can be objective, they can reframe their thoughts, they can reconstruct, they can deal with the things that's on the surface that's going to help them peel back the layers to eventually get to a space where they're able to talk about things that they probably never talked about. So once I realized and I seen success in it, oh, it became the through line of my work and the work that we do at the organization. And we feel like that is what makes us unique now in this time, because far not a lot of people are using cognitive behavior therapy and group therapy. We're moving towards it a little bit, but it's not often used. And it allows two things. It allows the practitioner to have an understanding quickly if a person needs deeper psychosocial support. And then what we can do as an organization is give our participants or our clients the support that they need, and they can still come to us, right?
Mm.
Like you can get CBT and still do psychosocial, a deeper psychosocial support. And then what it also does, it makes it not as, for lack of a better term, but like it just makes it comfortable to be a part of. Because oftentimes in our work, what we do is like we may post a quote that is very abstract that might deal with a social emotional issue or a societal issue, and we push our client or our participant to break that quote or that ideology down. And then
Mm.
through that, what they are actually doing is they're building the muscle on how to objectively think about things and break it down. And then we actually turnkey that back into their own lives. So how does this
Mm.
quote relate to you? And in the same exercise of breaking it down and coming to a consensus, now they're able to break down, all right, well, this is what I experienced. This is what this quote means to me. How did you feel in that? And then they're able to like start to articulate. So it is a repetition in it, in the practice, but it's so practical that they can now walk away and be like, all right, well, use that frame of thought when you're actually engaging with your mom, or use this frame of thought when you're actually engaging with your children's mother, or when you're going on a job interview and you're nervous. How do you kind of like deconstruct what it is that it's saying you're saying to yourself, so that way you can operate in a way that's healthy. And I found at it even support, like I'm thinking about a participant, I don't want to mention his name, but he was coming. We already knew that he had like substance abuse issues. Um, he was with a group of his peers in the sessions. No one would really talk about it because they all would utilize it, but he would use it a little bit more.
Mm.
And I found that over time in our conversations, he would say, "Yo, I'm gonna, go to outpatient." That became a part of his conversation until eventually he did it on his own after being going through the number of different sessions. He admitted himself in the outpatient program to get that support from a substance abuse. Had he not going through these CBT sessions, I don't think he would have ever built the muscle or the strength to actually go in and do it in the way that he did. So I feel like that is what makes us unique, and that is how we kind of like define our work within the context of mental health.
Wow, 100% believe what you said, the story that you gave. And so much of substance use in that work is really getting people through the stages of change to a point where they realize this is, recognize it for a problem for themselves and have the motivation to get the help that they need, right? We can't really force, right? Like we make it
Yes.
available. And when someone is ready versus they're forced to do it, I think we need to do both, depends on situation, not force, but right, really strongly encourage. But is not going to be as effective until the person really is ready for it. And there are
Yeah.
things that we can do. I think that's the beauty of what you were saying, is there are things you can do that isn't not hitting someone over the head with something, right?
Yes,
I
yes,
mean,
yes, yes. Amen.
that's youth development, that's CBT. And what you have said too is maybe there are things that have been in existence, but people don't necessarily feel like it's for them because it
Mm,
hasn't been translated in a way that they could feel like I can use this, right? That wasn't for me until you make it available
yeah.
for them. They see it as practical as skills. And you said you talk about needing to practice it because it's a set of skills and we are reversing, right? What we have kind of grown up with, right?
Mm,
That this is how I've always leaned on doing this. That's just kind of second nature to me. And now you're saying let's slow it down. Right.
yeah.
And even as a therapist who've been, doing community work for many years, when you talk about how you destigmatize mental health, I was like, oh, I think I got something new from it. So I really appreciate that. Is how if in health, of course, when we're thinking about health, we're not thinking immediately about being ill, right? Mental health, we absolutely, when we say mental health, people are thinking about illness, and that's just something odd. That's how we came to that point. And you are really being explicit about
Yes.
separating the two, not because we aren't able to talk about mental illness and mental, not being well, but you're helping people not kind of shrink away, right? The
Yep.
moment that we feel, oh, I don't want to talk about that, I don't feel ready, or I don't know if this is a place for me to feel safe to speak about it because there's stigma, especially talking about working with young men of color. You're like, no, let's enter this conversation together. Let's talk
Yeah.
about something that we care about, we want to have. Then we talk about this. It's not that we don't want to, but just not that, again, that reaction of, oh, I don't want to. You broke it
Yeah.
down for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In that simplest form, like, what does it mean to be mentally healthy? And they come up with the criteria, and it's like, okay, that is mental health. What does it mean not to be mentally healthy? And they come up with the criteria, right? That's called mental illness or mental disorders or mental struggles,
Mm,
right? And I was like, and even in that, there's layers to it, and you need to understand the layers, right? You may Yeah, you might consider somebody, that might be struggling. You might try to diagnose them with something that they don't have. No, they just going through something right now. Yeah, so we definitely make the distinction for them, and when it's layered and they're able to like pull it apart in that type of way, they're able to like psychologically digest it. Um, and there was something else that you mentioned, Evan, that I want to point out. I think another thing that we do is we look at our program models from longer stints. So, one of our major programs here at the B.R.O space is we have the B.R.O project. That is a 9 month to 10 month long program.
mm,
Well, a lot of these programs are maybe 5, 6, 7 months, maybe 37 sessions and things like that. The reason why we expand that time is because what we understand, especially with men, is that we don't want to jump out the window and like, hey, we here to support your mental health. We don't even really like we put the medicine in the applesauce in a sense. It's like, yo, just come and be. You have a space. What we want to do first is build trust with you. So
mm.
most of our sessions and our workshops is around like trust and belonging. And when we see that they get comfortable with that, then we kind of like introduce, all right, this is CBT. And they're like, okay, well, what is that? And then we walk them through that for at least another 3 to 4 months. And then the last 3 months is like, now, how do you become an advocate for change or advocate in your community or in your household? And that's the last 3 months. So most of our program models are like that. It's like these 9 to 10 month programs where they're able to build relationship with us, they're able to build relationship with the space. Then they kind of like be able to peel back the layers of self. And then once they peel back the layers of self, then we charge them to how do you be a standing community and still learn how to take care of yourself throughout the process. And I think that's another thing that makes us a little unique from any other
Yeah.
program models.
Absolutely. And it resonates so much with me because Mayor's Office of Community Mental Health is about being in community, right? I
Mhm.
really believe that. Even as a therapist, I work in therapy room one on one. I'm often thinking about who's that ecosystem of care, who's that network of care for the person. And sometimes we have it at home. We're very blessed to have that. Sometimes we have to have chosen
Mhm.
family and we're defining community, like in Bro Space, right?
Yeah.
And the essence of community mental health is finding that sense of belonging, safety, and support, and finding that purpose. And you're cultivating that. that. That's just really, really cool.
Thank
And
you.
I think you combine a lot of your background as an educator and a youth, person, development person, and you really have a diverse, right, career from being a dean to director of
Yeah.
culture at the Eagle Academy, teaching to CUNY Fatherhood Academy, and you also authored. You mentioned writing, right? The
Mm-hmm,
Provider, a guide for
mm-hmm.
co-parenting dads, and it really just speaks to me in this holistic approach of supporting young men. So from the perspective of CMH, we recognize that, right? That this is really what bro experience us is you. I think we have to have you come back.
Yeah.
Yep, right
Yeah.
back. We're just like that. So I was
Mm-hmm.
saying from our perspective of OCMH, um, we recognize that really Bro experience being a backbone of what a resilient mental health ecosystem is. Of course, we have clinics, we have hospital, and we have schools, we have churches, and we have community spaces and organization, and that where you are fostering trust. So I really appreciate what you do, and wanted to hear
Thank
from
you.
what consistent themes or lesson would you say that you have carried through your work, and how does that inform your whole person approach that you take to Bro? I mean, I think feel like hearing a little bit of it and love to just speak explicitly about that.
Wow. So the question is how do I take all of those lived experiences and put them
Well, not
into
all of
virtual?
it, but what is the
Got you,
theme
got
and
you.
lessons that you kind of have
Yeah,
carried
so I think
through your work?
yeah, absolutely. So I think that you are spot on. Where there's a few things that I realized very early is that men of color or men, period, don't express themselves because they don't have the vocabulary,
Mm,
right? And oftentimes that comes from what you learn in school, right? And it's very intentional. Like I even tell my facilitators and my team now, like you have to be resourceful. You have to like engage yourself in knowledge and information because it makes you a stronger resource and a stronger stance for the people that you are
mm,
privileged to support. So as a dean and and even as a writer, I oftentimes in a lot of our program areas from Little Bro all the way up to our fatherhood program, it is very much about them expressing themselves on pen to paper. um it is very much like creating spaces where what they write down they actually get to say out loud. That builds a level of vulnerability, and it helps them exercise that vulnerable muscle when they're able to articulate what they feel in a room full of people without being consumed by the judgment or what a person
mm,
thinks. The last part is like just creating a centralized like space that looks like them. So oftentimes what we will do is like we would at the end of different sessions ask them what they learned. If it's profound and we find it as a tool, we turn that into a quote that they came up with, right? And then when they walk back into the space, they're able to see their thoughts on paper up and oh man, that just does just wonders. So I feel like in my work that has been a through line of being able to do spoken word poetry to being a writer to being responsible for protecting school culture so kids can learn in a safe environment, and then also being able to create a space where they feel like it's theirs. Oftentimes most young people do not feel like the space belongs to them and they quickly disconnect. So at the bro
mm,
space, you can go to the refrigerator as much as you want. You can get a snack as much as you want without someone judging you for it, without someone telling you to go get a job because you're too big to be eating everything in my household. Like these are the messages that they, especially guys, these are the messages that they hear in their households, whether it's with their mothers, their wives, their significant others. We just kind of like provide a space where they know they can come to, whether they come all the time or not. When they get either too hot, too cold, rainy outside, or they're hungry, they stopping by. So I think that that is something that I have done throughout my work, and now I'm able to do at a bigger level, and then I'm able to put thought process in my team for them to then create spaces for young men that they work with as well.
Sometimes we say just hearing ourselves talk, having someone on the other side of it, then you start to have clarity, and then putting pen to paper to have it written down. I remember you saying this before. Really, what you're doing was reframing the narrative around
Yeah,
Black men, and I
yeah,
love that when I
absolutely. And
heard
then
you
giving them
saying
the
that.
ability to start to tell their own stories, right? Like if
Mm,
you think about society today, and one of the reasons why men don't speak is because oftentimes we either, when we start to, we get very emotional about it, where people are not used to dealing with us in our emotion, or someone else is telling our story. So in our work, as much as we possibly can, we want, tell your narrative, because this isolation or these silos is not going to help us elevate or create spaces in the world for people to actually get to know who you are. And that's what we do. We really push our guys to express themselves.
And I think about when I have my hat, or I guess you don't take the hats off often, right? When we take on different role as a therapist, being in a therapy room and just hearing people talk about their stories, and then through the writing, what I'm imagining is almost like, okay, well, that was the chapter, right? It's real for me. I'm still going through it, but then we know there's a next chapter, right?
Hmm.
You can see through and see to light of the end of the tunnel, so to speak, and that's something in the art form of right writing
Yeah,
and the practicality of it and how really it does something to you. And I really appreciate that's one
yeah,
of the
yeah.
modalities you do.
Absolutely. Another thing that it does, Evan, not to belabor on this point, but I think when we push them to write, it actually forces them to then critically think about the experience, because now it's with you, it's you and yourself actually doing the reflection, and you're putting it on paper. Did it actually happen in that way, or
Mm,
were you responding to something that you may have felt which triggered you? And it allows them to like actually rethink, like, oh, well, maybe this isn't a story, maybe, they'll never say it, but I often find that when they have struggles with putting their thoughts on paper, it's because the actual experience is not really what they experienced. And through the process of making them self reflect in a way where they're seeing their words back, because you can say things out in the air, but when the words come back to you and you have to articulate that, you can't lie to yourself. And it also supports them underlyingly in that way as well.
yeah, and that's perspective, that's insight, and
Hmm.
that's accountability, right? Things that we
Yep.
all want to have and grow to have, right?
Hmm.
So that's just really powerful stuff, and really, really cool. And that always makes me think, oh, yeah, I should write more too.
Yeah, yeah, no, we should
So
all, like, I think that
yeah,
is
yeah.
yeah, super important. Every morning I do morning, what they call morning pages. And I kind of like to write
Mm,
down what I'm feeling, because I mean, as an executive, I'm responsible for a lot of different things. So if I don't put myself down on paper, what I felt like I accomplished or didn't accomplish, it oftentimes will pile up. So every morning I do morning pages, like, what did you dream about? What's on your mind? What's on your thought for the day? Who do you need to talk to? And then I look through it and I'm like, yo, you really don't need to talk to this person. You can give that to him or her, and it allows me to literally level set before I even start my day.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
I think our listeners today need to be trying to, if they haven't even gone to sit down with you yet. And for young men of color listening, or anyone who really wants to support a mental well-being, or achieving, well, it's not the best word. We all kind of walking through our healing journey, right? But I think I absolutely believe that recovery and health is achievable. But I didn't want to make it sound like it's just this thing that we is a journey. So look for those who are listening and who are really wanting more support. What's a key piece of advice you would offer, and what's one action they can take? I know about a really cool website. Just saying.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So before I go to the website, I would say, every journey, needs a first step. So for every young man who wants to embark on a new path, and thinking different and feeling different, all it takes is that first step. And, just keep taking those steps to a point where you can find a space or a group of people or one person who can support you in that journey. And then the other part is that other than, our, staple organizational website where you can find out about our different programs, we do have a mental wellness website for men of color called www.bewellbro.org. It is an immersive website that highlights all the coolness around mental health, and the things that you should do when you feel like you are struggling, from getting support from someone externally, from reading articles that can help you put your frame of reference in context. We have hip hop songs and music that relate to certain things that you might be going through that can get you through the day. We reference a lot of different podcasts that's out there in the world that talks about men's health and both physically, spiritually, and mentally. Um, it's designed through what we call the seven dimensions of wellness, where spiritual, educational, work related, so on and so forth. And we've been in existence for about 7 weeks now, and we are expanding. This month, we're actually launching our first two episodes of our podcast, which I'm the host of. It's called B.R.O podcast.
Love
So
it.
I'm super excited about that to be dropping in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, if you don't want to come into our physical space, you can actually join our digital space, bewellbro.org.
And I think in today's really not just young people, but us grown up as well, we just like to be scrolling and kind of right things just kind of instant. And what you have in there are really bite size that people
Mm-hmm.
can take a bite of. So
Yes.
wanting to building on what you have said. What is this was probably our wrap up question because I feel like we have been talking so much and I love it. And I always feel like when we have people who we kind of gelling, we know, right? We're kind of speaking the same
Yes.
language. We need to have do more. Maybe I'll have to join you next time at yours. So, what do you
Absolutely.
see? Where do you see the most impactful opportunities for the city agencies and offices like OCMH or other CBOs like Bro Experience? An individual to collaborate even more effectively to improve mental health resources for men and men of color across the New York City.
Yeah, I think the one thing the city has to uh, realize is that in order for us to have a strong city, you have to have strong minds. You
Mm,
can't separate the two. In order to have a strong city, you have to have strong minds. So we need to pour way more money and resources in departments like yours. We need to give departments like yours the autonomy to decide what organizations will fit. We also need to identify the differences between the different organizations. If an organization is doing cure violence work, then we know, okay, this is the sector, this is the type of work that you do. If an
mm,
organization is more prone to doing mental services and emotional services work, we need to understand like this is the conglomerate. So that way, when we're looking at our community map and we're seeing that we have organizations surrounding, we're not just because they're black led or BIPOC led thinking that they all are dealing with public safety.
mm,
Now, because they are in their niches, we would know that the byproduct or the benefit would eventually will be that public safety or people will start to feel more safe because we know where we are sending our community members. Um, Oftentimes, I think what happens is that we get a few buzzwords and we attack those buzzwords. We pour all the money into those buzzwords, and then we think that that organization is going to be able to change the whole texture of the community. It takes a number of organizations doing different things. Like the Bro Experience, I'm very clear that we're not a work readiness organization. We're not a cure violence organization. We are a mental wellness organization. So when we partner with a cure violence group, we saying, hey, once you deal with the trauma and you get them to decrease the shootings and things like that, send them our way because now we'll do the long term work to support them with the way that they think about their community. And then once we're done with them, then we send them off to go ready to work because you can't go work if your mind ain't strong. You can't have a strong city without strong minds. So I think that whatever happens as far as the administration, I think that they need to really take a critical look at how we fund mental health agencies because we are not doing a great job. We may give a drop in the bucket compared to all of the other resources that we give, and then we still wondering why kids are not coming to school. We still trying to figure out why parents ain't sending their kids to school, and that's because there's emotional trauma that is happening. We wondering why gangs, it's not the proliferation of guns only. It is actually because people are hurting. And
Mm,
if I'm hurt, you can't tell me how much my pain is telling me to go outside to hurt someone. So we need to, and I know we always say it, it's always been said, and every time a new administration comes, but if we really want change, that money needs to be funneled through mental health services, and it needs to be readily available for the city to be able to disperse effectively,
mhm.
so that way we can have long lasting impact.
Yeah, I appreciate your thought on that. I think there's so much desire to have wraparound kind of services and support, which it really is the right way to think about it. Want to care for people holistically, but we cannot expect one organization to do it all and do it well, right? So what you're saying is like there are places for maybe more different kind of multi services, which is really good, but there are also time for us to think about specializing and also supporting those who are specializing, because you can go that much deeper and there's so much more brain cells and efforts that really is focusing on this one cause that really is the foundation of all good
Yeah.
things, right? When we're healthy, when we're mentally well. So thank you so much, Coach, for sharing your insights and just incredible work of the B.R.O experience, and really appreciate, and your dedication clearly has made the difference. I've seen some of these young people last time I came to your space for the health fair, and it was their idea that you gave them this kind of empowered them to do that. And also want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in. And for more initiatives, and you want to also get resources through Mayor's Office of Community Mental Health website, I think it's going to be somewhere there. We're going to put it down below, maybe in the description. But you can look up nyc.gov/mental health, and also follow our Instagram and LinkedIn profile. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you again, Coach.
Thank you. Thank you. This is really dope.
And be